Hello everyone watching at home, you're with Simon McClinton from Adelaide Eternal, bringing you another 7-minute 7-point series deck tech. This time I'm bringing you the overwhelming splendour of the deck that I call Get Rector. Now, aside from what you want your opponent to do, the name comes from the fact that you have a variety of different ways which you go and get Rector and then proceed to wreck your opponent. So let's look at how this actually works. So first of all, the three pieces of the deck that involve the combo are Arena Rector, Academy Rector, and Bitterheart Witch. Now if you haven't seen Bitterheart Witch before, it basically functions like an Academy Rector for these two massive curses over here. So you have a flash Worldly Tutor option to actually go turn 1 tutor for Bitterheart Witch or one of the Rectors, and turn 2 flash in one of those, which allows you to play your choice of Cruel Reality, which against control opponents basically kills them in 3 to 4 turns, and Overwhelming Splendor, which against your creature opponents goes, well, you have 0 opportunity to Reclamation Sage my enchantment or Kozilek Pride Mage my enchantment, because most of the time, especially in game 1, your creature-based decks from opponents are only going to have creature-based answers for these big spells over here. And then obviously the third option is Ugin the Spirit Dragon, which if played on turn 2, it's obviously a nightmare for any opponent. So that's the little sub-theme there with your Worldly Tutor and Flash. There are other ways to assemble this combination of basically a single card and some kind of sacrifice, but they're a little bit more clunky, and we'll look at them a little bit later. But essentially, the three major spells over here, the advantage of you playing this particular deck in this particular shell, which is a Mana Dork mid-range shell, means that quite often you have the ability to fail with your Rector plan or just play a mid-range game, and then at some point later in the game, when you have access to 5 lands and 2 Mana Dorks or some combination thereof, you end up just actually casting Cruel Reality, which is hilarious because your opponent is thinking you're a combo deck, they try to stop your flash, and then you just actually hardcast a thing that you wanted to find anyway. Now, the way to do that is you can also fuel via sacrificing the Rectors themselves with Phyrexian Tower, or you can sacrifice your dirtily creatures to make extra mana to play these powerful spells, or you have the fantastic combination, which is one of the reasons why I'm not playing Stoneforge Mystic in the deck. There's just not an 8th point in here, until Skull Clamp is one, obviously. Let's fingers crossed on that one. Now, we have Mana Drain and Mind Twist. The combination of these two, if you haven't seen it before, usually involves counter something somewhat relevant from your opponent, untap, and twist their entire hand. So this allows you to play the occasional control role when you need to, but in reality, or should I say Cruel Reality, you Mana Drain their 3-drop, and then on turn 4 you just cast Cruel Reality, which is pretty hilarious with Mana Drain mana. You also have some other soft interaction here in the form of Duress Inquisition Thoughtseize between the main and side, and a counter spell. But you don't go too heavy on this control theme. Now, the rest of the deck itself involves a mid-range shell. So we have 5 Mana Dorks, then you have a nice curve which allows you to go on a pod chain involving Snapcaster Mage for an early flash and do a mid-game flash again if it failed. Baleful Strix to slow your opponent down and to block, but also to pod again into your 3-drops. And your 3-drops involve Spellseeker, which finds Flash, Eternal Witness, which returns the Flash that failed maybe the first time around, you can try it again, and then you curve your way up into the actual Rectors themselves. If you get to a point where your pod has been active and you've gone through your chain of 1, 2, 3, 4, then podding your Arena Rector away into your Titania in order to get your Ugin is probably not really the point, because you've probably already won the game because you've activated pod a whole variety of times. However, that is gravy when in the late game all you have is this 1/1 Spellseeker, and then you top deck a Birthing Pod, which is pretty nice. Now, the removal package here is relatively light, but that's the same with any mid-range deck. And you have versatile removal in the form of Swords of Plowshares and Abrupt Decay. Garruk Relentless is really good against control decks, obviously, and Umezawa's Jitte great against creature-based decks. Your other 2-drops here in Scavenging Ooze and Kozilek Pride Mage are rarely potted away, but you have the ability to do so when you need to. Now, your tutor package here is quite heavy, and that is because even though you do want to often find this combo, you do have the opportunity to play the mid-range game and then just Eladamri's call for Titania and play Titania, because that's just a path to victory. You also have Diabolic Intent, which again I was talking before about the various different ways that you can actually get rid of a Rector when you don't have flash itself, and sometimes just casting your Rector and then Diabolic Intenting it away, getting one of these crazy powerful spells into play, and then actually finding a backup spell for if they had an answer to this is really, really good. Of course, you don't want to play all the cantrips, but Brainstorm is fantastic, and I'm a very, very big supporter of Brainstorm in mid-range decks when you can afford it, but not the other cantrips, because a late-game Brainstorm, when you put away 2 lands and shuffle them away with Birthing Pod, for example, is a great path to Ancestral Recall. Then we have Steel Shaper's Gift for Skull Clamp and Umezawa's Jitter. And the last little key piece here is Aminatu, the Fate Shifter. It looks strange in the deck, but in reality it's really, really cool. It does a couple of things. So first of all, you have the obvious, which is exile target permanent and basically blink it. Now, this is really, really powerful because you have a pod deck. If you're in a pod deck, fundamentally you're going to have enters the battlefield creatures like these, and Aminatu allows you to rebuy those abilities. The other less obvious one is its plus ability, and this draw a card and put a card back on top of your library is integral to the deck. The reason being, you actually have 3 stinkers. These cards, when you draw them, are clunky, and you just don't want them sitting in your hand in the mid-game. Late game, great. Early game, great. Well, early game, really, really bad, but you can get rid of it. Mid game, also, you want to kind of get rid of these spells because you don't have like a show and tell, for example. And putting a card back and shuffling it away is fantastic, which is what Aminatu does. Let's look over at our sideboard. I've got 3 categories here. We've got our anti-creature package. So against burn, you want to bring in both of these just to buy you time, as well as Kitchen Finks. And then against just general mid-range mirrors, you can bring in Toxic Deluge and engineer situations where you get 2, 3, or 4 for ones. And remember, Toxic Deluge deluging away one of these is great. And also against aggro decks, sometimes you just plop out an Arena Rector and they just don't attack you because they have to wait for a time when they can actually kill you in one go, because they know that this is part of your combo. Hostage Taker, fantastic, obviously. And then against control, we have the usual suspects in the form of Voice, Library, Flusterstorm, and Carpet. But Sin Collector is great in this deck because you have the colours to cast it, but also you can pod through it and make the pod chain at 3. Against combo, just shape these according to your meta. You've got anti-graveyard, you've got anti-enchantment and built from scrap, and then against, Storm or whatever is appropriate. So shape it accordingly. So if you like the look of Get Rector and you want your opponents to get Rector and you want to, say, get one with a Worldly Tutor and then flash it out on turn 2, try sleeving this deck up and enjoy those grindy mid-range games too.